3. Request frequency change. Sydney Kingsford Ground, November 573 Kilo Echo, ready to taxi. Alpha Tango Foxtrot 73, frequency change approved. Good day. Sydney Kingsford Ground, Beeline 121, ready to taxi. Sydney Kingsford Ground, Coriner 4180, ready to taxi to runway 34 left. November 573 Kilo Echo, taxi to runway 07. Contact tower when ready. Coriner 4180, continue taxi. Continue taxi, Coriner 4180. Beeline 121, taxi to runway 07. Contact tower when ready. Sydney Kingsford Ground, November 126 Foxtrot Hotel, ready for pushback. Taxiing to runway 07, November 573 Kilo Echo. Taxiing to runway 07, Beeline 121. Virgin 009, pushback approved. Expect runway 07. November 126 Foxtrot Hotel, pushback approved. Expect runway 07. Sydney Kingsford Ground, November 522 Alfa Romeo, ready for pushback. Thank you. November 126 Foxtrot Hotel. November 522 Alfa Romeo, pushback approved. Expect runway 07. Sydney Kingsford Ground, India Foxtrot Sierra Mike, ready for pushback. India Foxtrot Sierra Mike, pushback approved. Expect runway 07. Pushback approved. India Foxtrot Sierra Mike. Sydney Kingsford Ground, Chinook 1948, ready for pushback. Beeline 121, cross runway 16 right. Crossing runway 16 right, Beeline 121. Virgin 009, request permission to cross runway 16 right. Sydney Kingsford Ground, Delta 2626 Heavy, ready for pushback. Chinook 1948, pushback approved. Expect runway 07. Delta 2626 Heavy, pushback approved. Expect runway 07. Pushback approved. Chinook 1948. November 573 Kilo Echo, request permission to cross runway 16 right. Virgin 009, cross runway 07. Virgin 009, cross runway 16 right. Pushback approved. Delta 2626 Heavy, crossing runway 16 right. Virgin 009. Sydney Kingsford Ground, November 522 Alfa Romeo, ready to taxi to runway 07. Coriner 4180, request permission to cross runway 07. November 573 Kilo Echo, cross runway 16 right. Coriner 4180, cross runway 07. Sydney Kingsford Ground, Canchas 34, request taxi to parking. Crossing runway 16 right. November 573 Kilo Echo, crossing runway 07. Coriner 4180. Continue taxi, Canchas 34. Sydney Kingsford Ground, India Foxtrot Sierra Mike, ready to taxi. November 522 Alfa Romeo, continue taxi. Beeline 121, continue taxi. Continue taxi, November 522 Alfa Romeo. India Foxtrot Sierra Mike, taxi to runway 07. Contact tower when ready. Continue taxi, Beeline 121. Taxiing to runway 07, India Foxtrot Sierra Mike. Sydney Kingsford Unicum, India Foxtrot Sierra Mike, crossing runway 07. Sydney Kingsford Tower, November 126 Foxtrot Hotel, ready for takeoff at runway 07, remaining in the pattern. November 1 Hotel Bravo, line up and wait runway 07. November 126 Foxtrot Hotel, hold short of runway 07. Line up and wait runway 07, November 1 Hotel Bravo. November 1 Hotel Bravo, runway 07, cleared for immediate takeoff. Cleared for takeoff, runway 07, November 1 Hotel Bravo. Indonesia 884 Heavy, contact Sydney departure on 118.4. Chinook 1948, hold short of runway 07. Holding short runway 07, Chinook 1948. Contacting Sydney departure on 118.4, Indonesia 884 Heavy. Foxtrot India November 100, contact Sydney approach on 124.4. Contacting Sydney approach on 124.4, Foxtrot India November 100. Sydney Kings Ford Tower, Corriner 4180, ready for takeoff at runway 34 left, remaining in the pattern. Holding short runway 07, November 126 Foxtrot Hotel. November 126 Foxtrot Hotel, line up and wait runway 07. Corriner 4180, line up and wait runway 34 left. United 290 Heavy, you're in an active airspace. Please contact Sydney Kingsford Tower on 120.5. Line up and wait runway 34 left. Corriner 4180. Sydney Kingsford Tower, Jetstar 121, ready for takeoff at runway 07, remaining in the pattern. Jetstar 121, hold short of runway 07. United 290 Heavy, number 1, runway 34 left, cleared to land. Holding short runway 07, Jetstar 121. November 126 Foxtrot Hotel, runway 07, cleared for immediate takeoff, unable pattern work. Corriner 4180, runway 34 left, cleared for immediate takeoff, unable pattern work. Cleared for takeoff, runway 34 left, Corriner 4180. Sydney Kingsford Tower, Foxtrot India November 100 is 4 nautical miles to the southeast at 5,900 feet, inbound for landing, requesting runway 07. Thank you, good day. November 126 Foxtrot Hotel. Foxtrot India November 100, contact Sydney approach on 124.4. Contacting Sydney approach on 124.4, Foxtrot India November 100. November 126 Foxtrot Hotel, cancel takeoff clearance, hold position. Sydney Kingsford Tower, Saudi 14, ready for takeoff at runway 07, departing straight out. Turkish 7 Heavy, is on final runway 34 left, full stop. Sydney Kingsford Tower, November 573 Kilo Echo, ready for takeoff at runway 07, departing straight out. Wilco, November 126 Foxtrot Hotel. Corriner 4180, request frequency change. Corriner 4180, contact Sydney Kingsford Tower on 120.5. Corriner 4180, frequency change approved. Good day. November 573 Kilo Echo, hold short of runway 07. Frequency change approved. Corriner 4180, good day. Turkish 7 Heavy, Roger. Holding short runway 07, November 573 Kilo Echo. Saudi 14, hold short of runway 07. Holding short runway 07, Saudi 14. Sydney Kingsford Tower, November 522 Alfa Romeo, ready for takeoff at runway 07, remaining in the pattern. Sydney Kingsford Tower, Foxtrot India November 100 is 5 nautical miles to the southwest at 6,000 feet, inbound for landing, requesting runway 07. Stand by. Qantas 404. Sydney Kingsford Unicum, Qantas 404 is clear of all runways. Sydney Kingsford Unicum, Jetstar 121 is taking off runway 07, remaining in the pattern. Sydney Kingsford Unicum, Virgin 009 is taking off runway 07, departing straight out. Jetstar 121, line up and wait runway 07. Line up and wait runway 07, Jetstar 121. Sydney Kingsford Tower, Chinook 1948, ready for takeoff at runway 07, remaining in the pattern. Jetstar 121, runway 07, cleared for immediate takeoff. make right traffic. Sydney Kingsford Tower, November 522 Alfa Romeo, ready for takeoff at runway 07, remaining in the pattern. Chinook 1948, line up and wait runway 07. Line up and wait runway 07, Chinook 1948. November 522 Alfa Romeo, hold short of runway 07. Holding short runway 07, November 522 Alfa Romeo. Cleared for takeoff, runway 07, Jetstar 121. Stand by, November 125 Oscar Sierra. Chinook 1948, runway 07, cleared for immediate takeoff, make right traffic. Sydney Kingsford Tower, American 499, ready for takeoff at runway 07, remaining in the pattern. Cleared for takeoff, runway 07, Chinook 1948. American 499, hold short of runway 07. Holding short runway 07, American 499. November 522 Alfa Romeo, line up and wait runway 07. Line up and wait runway 07, November 522 Alfa Romeo. Turkish 7 Heavy, number 1, runway 34 left, cleared to land. Sydney Kingsford Tower, Aerobio is 20 nautical miles to the west at 9,600 feet, inbound for landing, requesting runway 07. Sydney Kingsford Tower, Singapore 1150 Heavy, ready for takeoff at runway 34 left, departing straight out. Aerobio, number 1, runway 07, cleared to land. Foxtrot India November 100, you're in an active airspace. Please contact Sydney Kingsford Tower on 120.5. Sydney Kingsford Tower, Infinite Flight 0177 is 18 nautical miles to the south at 5,400 feet, inbound for landing, requesting runway 34 left. Foxtrot India November 100, number 1, runway 07, cleared to land. November 522 Alfa Romeo, runway 07, cleared for immediate takeoff. Number 1, cleared to land, runway 34 left, Turkish 7 Heavy. Sydney Kingsford Tower, American 499, ready for takeoff at runway 07, remaining in the pattern. Turkish 7 Heavy, exit runway when able and contact ground, please expedite. Wilco. American 499, hold short of runway 07. Holding short runway 07, American 499. Infinite Flight 0177, number 1, runway 34 right, cleared to land. Number 1, cleared to land, runway 34 right, Infinite Flight 0177. Singapore 1150 Heavy, runway 34 left, cleared for immediate takeoff. Cleared for takeoff, runway 34 left, Singapore 1150 Heavy. American 499, line up and wait runway 07. Sydney Kingsford Tower, India Foxtrot Sierra Mike, ready for takeoff at runway 07, departing straight out. India Foxtrot Sierra Mike, hold short of runway 07. Sydney Kingsford Tower, November 126 Foxtrot Hotel, ready for takeoff at runway 07, remaining in the pattern. American 499, runway 07, cleared for immediate takeoff, make left traffic. Cleared for takeoff, runway 07, American 499. Number 1, cleared to land, runway 07, Foxtrot India November 100. Sydney Kingsford Tower, Qantas 2727 Heavy, ready for takeoff at runway 07, departing north. Going around, Foxtrot India November 100. Qantas 2727 Heavy, runway 07, cleared for immediate takeoff. November 126 Foxtrot Hotel, hold short of runway 07. Chinook 1948, request frequency change. Cleared for takeoff, runway 07, Qantas 2727 Heavy. Chinook 1948, frequency change approved. Good day. Respond to go around. Frequency change approved. Chinook 1948, good day. Sydney Kingsford Tower, Delta 2626 Heavy, ready for takeoff at runway 07, remaining in the pattern. Delta 2626 Heavy, hold position. Sydney Kingsford Tower, Velocity 303 Super, ready for takeoff at runway 07, remaining in the pattern. Holding position, Velocity 303 Super. Going around, Foxtrot India November 100. Respond to go around. Stand by. November 125 Oscar Sierra. Delta 2626 Heavy. Runway 07. Cleared for immediate takeoff. Make left traffic. Sydney Kingsford Tower. India Foxtrot Sierra Mike. Ready for takeoff at runway 07. Departing straight out. India Foxtrot Sierra Mike. Hold position. Cleared for takeoff. Runway 07. Delta 2626 Heavy. Holding position. India Foxtrot Sierra Mike. Holding short runway 07. November 126 Foxtrot Hotel. November 125 Oscar Sierra. Hold position. November 126 Foxtrot Hotel. Runway 07. Cleared for immediate takeoff. Make right traffic. Infinite Flight 0177 is on final runway 34 left. Holding position. November 125 Oscar Sierra. India Foxtrot Sierra Mike. Runway 07. Cleared for immediate takeoff. Thank you. Good day. November 126 Foxtrot Hotel. November 126 Foxtrot Hotel. Hold position. Stand by. India Foxtrot Sierra Mike. Sydney Kingsford Tower. Velocity 303 Super. Ready for takeoff at runway 07. Departing straight out. Sydney Kingsford Tower. November 125 Oscar Sierra. Ready for takeoff at runway 16 left. Remaining in the pattern. Infinite Flight 0177. Number 1. Runway 34 right. Cleared to land. November 125 Oscar Sierra. Hold short of runway 16 left. Sydney Kingsford Tower. Infinite Flight 0177 is 4 nautical miles to the south at 900 feet. Inbound for landing. Requesting runway 34 left. Holding short runway 16 left. November 125 Oscar Sierra. Velocity 303 Super. Runway 07. Cleared for immediate takeoff. Sydney Kingsford Tower. India Foxtrot Sierra Mike. Ready for takeoff at runway 07. Remaining in the pattern. Holding short runway 07. India Foxtrot Sierra Mike. Sydney Kingsford Unicum. November 125 Oscar Sierra is clear of all runways. Sydney Kingsford Unicum. India Foxtrot Sierra Mike is taking off runway 07, departing straight out. Sydney Kingsford Unicum. November 125 Oscar Sierra is clear of all runways. Sydney Kingsford Unicum. Qantas 145. Taxiing to runway 07. Sydney Kingsford Unicum. Scooter 316 Heavy is on final. Runway 34 left. Sydney Kingsford Unicum. Qantas 145 is taking off runway 07, departing south. Sydney Kingsford Unicum. Tango Romeo Oscar Lima Lima is taking off runway 07, remaining in the pattern. Sydney Kingsford Unicum. Sierra Kilo 60 is taking off runway 34 right, departing north. Sydney Kings Fort Uniform, November 688 Bravo Quebec is taking off runway 25, departing south. Sydney Kings Fort Unicum, Navy 5 is 10 nautical miles to the south at 3,300 feet, inbound for landing, will make left traffic for runway 34 left. Sydney Kings Fort Unicum, Sierra Kilo 60 is taking off runway 34 right, departing north. Sydney Kings Fort Unicum, November 125 Oscar Sierra is clear of all runways. Sydney Kings Fort Unicum, November 125 Oscar Sierra is clear of all runways. able turn left and contact ground. Please expedite. Traffic on final. Sydney Kingsport Tower. Alpha 270 is 19 nautical miles to the south at 4,000 feet. Inbound for landing. Wilco. Sydney Kingsport Tower. Alpha Bravo Romeo Bravo 001 is 18 nautical miles to the west at 6,700 feet. Inbound for landing. Requesting runway 07. November 125 Oscar Sierra. You're in an active airspace. Please contact Sydney Kingsport Tower on 120.5. November 125 Oscar Sierra. You're in an active airspace. Please contact Sydney Kingsport Tower on 120.5. November 125 Oscar Sierra. Cancel takeoff clearance. Hold position. Sydney Kingsport Tower. Aeroflot 270 is 16 nautical miles to the south at 3,900 feet. Inbound for landing. Wilco. November 125 Oscar Sierra. Sydney Kingsport Tower. November 125 Oscar Sierra. Ready for takeoff at runway 16 right. Remaining in the pattern. November 125 Oscar Sierra. Exit runway when able. Contact ground on the taxiway. Wilco. Executing missed approach. November 125 Oscar Sierra. Going around. Aeroflot 270. November 125 Oscar Sierra. Please check tutorials on the forum for assistance using ATC instructions. Sydney Kingsport Tower. November 125 Oscar Sierra. Ready for takeoff at runway 16 right. Remaining in the pattern. India Foxtrot Sierra Mike. Request frequency change. Respond to go around. November 125 Oscar Sierra. Request frequency change. Sydney Kingsport Tower. Aeroflot 270 is 10 nautical miles to the south at 2,100 feet. Inbound for landing. Aeroflot 270. Number 1. Runway 34 left. Clear to land. Number 1. Clear to land. Runway 34 left. Aeroflot 270. Alpha Bravo Romeo Bravo 001 is on final runway 07. Full stop. Aeroflot 270 is on final runway 34 left. Alpha Bravo Romeo Bravo 001. Roger. Alpha Bravo Romeo Bravo 001. When able turn left and contact ground. Please expedite. Traffic on final. Attention all aircraft. Sydney Kings Ford Tower is now closed. Good day. Wilco. India Foxtrot Sierra Mike, you're in an active airspace. Please contact Canberra Tower on 118.7. Canberra Tower, India Foxtrot Sierra Mike is 23 nautical miles to the northeast at 15,200 feet, inbound for landing. India Foxtrot Sierra Mike, number 1, runway 12, clear to land. India Foxtrot Sierra Mike, number 1, runway 17, clear to land. India Foxtrot Sierra Mike, I'm sorry. Virgin 041 Heavy, request frequency change. Virgin 041 Heavy, frequency change approved. Good day. Frequency change approved. Virgin 041 Heavy, good day. Canberra Tower, India Foxtrot Sierra Mike, inbound on the ILS, runway 17. India Foxtrot Sierra Mike, number 1, runway 17, cleared to land. Number 1, cleared to land, runway 17, India Foxtrot Sierra Mike. New Zealand 57, line up and wait runway 17. Line up and wait runway 17, New Zealand 57. New Zealand 57, runway 17, cleared for takeoff. Cleared for takeoff, runway 17, New Zealand 57. Canberra Tower, Echo Alpha Golf Lima Echo Super, ready for takeoff at runway 17, remaining in the pattern. Echo Alpha Golf Lima Echo Super, hold short of runway 17. Holding short runway 17, Echo Alpha Golf Lima Echo Super. India Foxtrot Sierra Mike is on final runway 17, full stop. India Foxtrot Sierra Mike, roger. Canberra Tower, Echo Alpha Golf Lima Echo Super, ready for takeoff at runway 17, remaining in the pattern.
200.
Echo Alpha Golf Lima Echo Super, hold position. Holding position, Echo Alpha Golf Lima Echo Super.
100. 40, 30, 20, 10.
Echo Alpha Golf Lima Echo Super, line up and wait runway 17. Line up and wait runway 17, Echo Alpha Golf Lima Echo Super. India Foxtrot Sierra Mike, contact Canberra ground on 121.7. November 688 Bravo Quebec, you're in an active airspace. Please contact Canberra Tower on 118.7. Echo Alpha Golf Lima Echo Super, runway 17, cleared for takeoff. Contacting Canberra ground on 121.7, India Foxtrot Sierra Mike. Cleared for takeoff, runway 17, Echo Alpha Golf Lima Echo Super. Canberra ground, India Foxtrot Sierra Mike, request taxi to parking. India Foxtrot Sierra Mike, taxi to parking. Taxiing to parking, India Foxtrot Sierra Mike.